From the heart of Central Florida, you are listening to the most electrifying show in media, A Neighbor's Choice. And I'm your host, your neighbor, David Gornoski. So glad to be back with you, live across Central Florida, where the problems we have, they're not that hard to solve. We just have to learn to roll up our sleeves and work together as neighbors, challenging the groupthink that binds us into the same old, the groupthink that suggests that the true path to success is to blame your problems on somebody else, to offload your guilt onto a common enemy, a common scapegoat, and then from that point of bind a group of people together that agree with you on that common villain and spend your entire life obsessed with that person or group or whatever it may be. On A Neighbor's Choice, we are interested in the idea that America is at its best when America allows for innovation, invention, and discovery. And in order to do that, we have to have an environment in which personhood is protected at all costs. That the human being, the individual, should not be fodder for the crowd's whims. And that the moment we violate that moral foundation of civilization, it starts a slippery slope in which everything is up for grabs. Everything is up for mob violence. And you say, well, where's the mob violence? Well, it happens in an obvious way when we see things on the street where folks are getting hurt or vandalized. But then we also see that mob violence in a more hidden fashion when millions of people vote to do things against their neighbor that they know good and well is not moral for them to do as an individual. So if you have that kind of situation where people are doing things that they know they shouldn't do as individuals, but they're doing it anyways because they have the hidden anonymity of the voting booth to hide behind, it's going to destroy our ability to trust one another. It's going to destroy our ability to get along with one another. It's going to destroy our ability to pave a better future for our kids. Now, I'm not an absolutist about this. I don't believe in a utopia. I don't believe that you have to snap your fingers and get rid of all the bad laws and all the things in one day. That's not the way it works. That's what ideology says. What I am trying to introduce is the idea that if we imitate Jesus, whether you're religious or not, that it provides the best blueprint for a practical guide to treating our neighbors the way we want to be treated. And that's the golden rule, and it's something that is so passé in the world of policy. But it has everything to do with why we continue to fall into the same mistakes over and over again. You'll often hear from folks that say, the problem with our culture is that we have abandoned God. We have abandoned respect for God, right? And they'll say perhaps, the problem with our culture is that not enough folks want to, love their neighbor, as Jesus says. I mean, even people of every religion and every worldview like that message, to love your neighbor as yourself. We all, if you ask the person on the street, hey, what's going on with the world? Do you think the world would be a better place if we would all start loving our neighbors as ourselves? I would tell you that a lot of folks would say, absolutely, that's the secret we're missing. But then here's what happens. When I get into the policy details of what that means we have to let go of in our political world, the devil creeps up, right? That's when the devil in the detail shows up. Because when you start saying, okay, if we're going to love our neighbor as ourselves, can we go and use government to take from our neighbor who's got more than us? Because if you were in their shoes and you had money, would you want it to be forcibly taken from you? Or would you rather voluntarily come to the point where you realize you need to use your wealth in lavishly gracious ways and lavishly prodigious ways to help and to care and to tend to the needs of your neighbor around you? And it's that kind of empathy that we lack in this political context. And it's something that this show is going to bring into the mainstream, because this is the stumbling block that everyone in our culture is wrestling with, and the world over for that matter, which is How can we have our cake and eat it too? How can we all sing from the song of love your neighbor, but then not practice it when it's right in front of our eyes? We always make excuses. We always make excuses for exemptions for which we can use another standard of our life rather than loving our neighbor as ourselves, right? So we're always looking for, well, if they're rich and they inherited their wealth, they don't deserve it, and I have to take it, and I need to take it. And it's like, well, imagine if you were in their shoes. Imagine you inherited wealth, and you desire to use that wealth to pursue ends that would make the world a better place as you see it. So perhaps you inherited wealth and you want to protect the rainforest. So you want to spend all your inheritance, and a lot of it or whatever, on developing technologies and developing things that can alleviate the destruction of the rainforest. And then someone comes along and says, you know what? Yeah, I love my neighbor as myself, but you're my neighbor, but you're too rich, so I'm too jealous of that, and you inherited your money. So therefore, I don't have to love you as I would want to be loved if I was in your shoes. I don't have to have empathy from your perspective. I don't have to respect your free will that's made in God's image, because God is free. And if God is free, then man is made in God's image, then man is free. And that I don't have to respect any of that, because when I do the dirty deed of political process, I can extract the wealth that you were going to use to voluntarily create a wonderful thing for the rainforest, and I can take that and direct it towards a new policy like wind farms or solar panels that maybe are not actually the most effective thing to help the environment. Maybe they're actually going to make obscene profits for people who curry political favor and get big government tax dollar handouts for their particular crony industry. So do you see how I'm just showing you one example, just off the top of my head, how this policy of abandoning all of we know it's true. See, this is the thing about A Neighbor's Choice that makes this show very unique, is that I don't stay in the cloistered world of religious radio. At the same time, I'm not completely a secular program. It's a mixture of reality, because this is the way the real world works. Politics is the domain of religion. There is no such thing as separation of church and state, because the state itself is a kind of church. It's a vestige of ancient religion that goes back thousands of years, and our ability to try to find meaning by binding ourselves together through the mutual exclusion of someone that violates taboos that we share in common, that makes us feel a shared sense of identity. So when I talk about Jesus's personhood revolution, I understand it's a little different from the way you hear the context of Jesus. Usually you hear Jesus as a disembodied deity who's kind of like another pantheon of gods. Could be, a nationalism, could be money, could be Zeus, could be Thor, could be something, just another pantheon, just another person in a pantheon of gods. And therefore, Jesus is just, a private matter that you pick a fairy tale and you believe and it makes you feel good. That's not at all what Jesus has anything to do with. Jesus' message was completely related to our politics, completely related to our economics, completely related to our sense of belonging, our sense of identity, and completely related to our concepts of mercy and sacrifice and justice. So when I look at this issue of how do I get the public to see this, it's going to take a full court press. It's going to take me engaging religious figures. It's going to take me engaging academic figures. It's going to take me engaging people in the invention and innovation world, which I do all of these things. It's going to take me engaging the secular world, the political world, the economic world, the philosophical world. All of these things must be brought into a holistic picture if we're going to have a path forward towards positive growth and win-win solutions for everyone. So have you heard this program? Have you heard these ideas on any other program? Have you heard the idea that you can use the basic teaching that we know from someone like the master of history himself, Jesus, when he says, love your neighbor as yourself? That is a requirement that allows you to step into the shoes of your neighbor. And maybe you say, you know what, your neighbor, again, inherited wealth, or maybe your neighbor hates your guts because of your ideology. You have to be able to step into your neighbor's shoes and say, they don't know what they're doing. They're possessed by groupthink. It's not them that's hating me. It's just they're possessed by a hive mind. And therefore, they know not what they do. And therefore, you have to think about it. If I was in their shoes, would I, want to be treated the way I feel like treating them right now, which is perhaps in a bad way, in a mean way? And you have to step from that moment and say, no. If I was lost and confused in groupthink, I wouldn't want someone to dehumanize me and throw me out and give me no chance to grow. And so at the same token, we have to have that spirit of loving our neighbor as ourselves permeate every aspect of our world today. And I understand that people think this is quaint. It's too quaint. It's too trivial. We need, if you're talking to leftist folks, we need radical change. We got to force everything. Now they want to have a national mask mandate. The left says they're against fascism, but they want to use central command and control economy to force everyone to use a mask. And it's fine if you want to use a mask individually, but the idea that you would force your neighbor through some kind of dictate for 330 million people, as Nancy Pelosi wanted to do, that is so asinine to the concept of loving your neighbor as yourself. Because for some people, wearing a mask may not be necessary as much. And for some people, wearing a mask may be unhealthy. It may cause there's scientific debate is very, very unsettled on this issue. And we need to have a free society that protects free will, that protects the individual neighbor to work these things out together voluntarily through persuasion. And that's what we do on A Neighbor's Choice. We'll continue in a moment on A Neighbor's Choice. Don't miss it.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It can be devastating. There is a law firm in Tampa Bay that will keep you informed throughout the entire process. That law firm is Catania & Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania & Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims do not even realize that they can claim compensation for their loss until they talk to Catania & Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to CataniaCatania.com, award-winning over 28 years and family first. Catania & Catania, personal injury, auto accident, and motorcycle accident attorneys.
Monitoring spokeswoman. The one thing that we've learned from an epidemic is that if we are healthy, we are far less likely to be susceptible to grave sickness. With that stated, stem cell activation is a big part of keeping ourselves healthy. By activating your own stem cells, you'll experience energy, better sleep, reduction in pain, and a support system that supports faster healing from wounds. LifeWave X39 patches are an easy, cost-affordable way to activate stem cells. Clinical studies demonstrate that LifeWave patches reset the genes in the body to a younger, healthier state. By wearing the daily patch, your body will activate the stem cells to give you benefits of a better way of living a healthy, productive life. Go to lifewave.com/B-radio to see how you can elevate, activate, and regenerate your life with stem cell therapy. There's a special offer now with B Radio. The address again is lifewave.com/B-radio. Live healthier and wiser with the X39 LifeWave patches at lifewave.com/B-radio.
Let's face it, these are stressful times. New routines, the constant bombardment of bad news, and trying to keep you and your family safe all the time. It's Frank for Center for Men's Health. During these stressful times, your mood is so critical, and nothing's more important to a guy's mood than testosterone. The single greatest issue for guys with low T is mood. And the single greatest change for men that get low T care is a greatly improved mood. Many are grumpy when they start, and most can't believe how much their mood improves once they get treated. And everything improves once your mood improves. Feel the difference C4MH.com can make in your life. I've been a patient of C4MH.com for a couple of years, and recently I've lost 20 pounds because now I have the energy to work out from home. And that'll put you in a good mood too. C4MH.com's express treatment plan is convenient, affordable, and above all, safe. And with locations all up and down West Florida, there's one near you right now. Find out more. Go to c4mh.com.
So there's this tendency among, the debate in political circles today that there's some kind of inherent tension, there's some kind of inherent dichotomy between economic freedom, markets that are voluntarily working out problems together, not accumulating debt and spending from government, but rather finding bottom-up solutions, to work out the problems that neighbors encounter together as they seek a common good. And so there's this weird false dichotomy that's just not based in reality, that if you want economic liberty, you have to give up culture. You have to give up a love of the common good, a love for little things, the small towns that we grew up in, that you have to abandon that, and abandon the care for the family and for the worker. And I just don't believe that's correct. I think that these things that we think are in juxtaposition against each other are really just an error that we make that assumes that the only reason why one could want economic liberty is if one is greedy or if one is materially consumed, right? But that's not necessarily the case. If we look at it from a perspective that looks at Jesus as our model to imitate, I think it's clear that Jesus would not be putting coercive, top-down force to force people to do good economic choices that benefit families, that benefit people's small-town communities, that benefit the raising of children. I don't think he would use force. In fact, it's exactly the point of his entire life story. Over and over again, he is presented with the temptation to use force as a shortcut to achieve his desires for loving our neighbors as ourselves. And again, he consistently refuses it by his word and by his actions. And so when we live in a society today where the one thing that binds us together the most is our shared inheritance of the Christian tradition, we may need to humble ourselves and realize, first of all, the metaphysical claims that we think are too outlandish for Christianity to be accepted may not be the barrier to entry into the Christian tradition that we've set them up to be in our minds. That perhaps there's other issues that we're bothered by because we want to kill the messenger. The Christian story is about learning to let go of the false reality that we are the captains of our destiny, and at the same time that we are the autonomous islands unto ourselves that can desire whatever we want without any limit. And I think it's that bad idea that left and right have both succumbed to in America, and everybody in the independent middle, that has allowed us to attach the notion that economic liberty somehow has to be based in some kind of drive for selfish egoism or materialism, and it simply doesn't. One can be extremely, and in fact, I would suggest the most proper way to imitate Jesus is to allow for economic liberty. Because what is economic liberty if not the ability for human beings to work out problems and to achieve ends without hurting people and initiating physical violence? The idea that private property is not found in the Bible is a myth. It's all over the place. And so just because somebody had a better advantage than others, maybe they were born in a better environment, they were born into wealth, whatever it is, doesn't give us the right to consume our minds with envy and then to hide in the crowd of anonymity of a voting booth and to vote to enact coercive punishments that distort economic liberty for all as a way to somehow get the rich. So we have a society that is very, very much in need of a good narrative shift, and a narrative that folks around the country can get behind. The Hispanic population is growing, and they have a deep-seated heritage with the Christian tradition. The Black community is deeply rooted in the Christian tradition in America. You have folks in other groups in America, ethnic identity groups and so forth, that have a deeper identity in their Christian tradition. And it's that common story that we're going to have to rediscover and revisit, and not be sloppy with it, not be flippant with application, using bumper sticker slogans and cherry-picked passages of the text of the Bible as a way to justify whatever dumb ideology we come across. No, we need to be clear about it. We need to be clear that Jesus is not one who uses police to enact laws against nonviolent choices, including economic choices that we don't agree with. At the same time, we have to be patient with our neighbors. We cannot be zealots for radical utopian, overthrow of the problems we find in our society. That's never an option. Certainly not an option that imitates Jesus' example. But rather, we have to be able to work with our neighbors and incrementally develop a pathway that always moves the ball forward towards more peace, more virtue, more liberty, more prosperity. And it starts at the smallest level, which is the family and the individual. They go hand in hand. Without the family, you can't have an individual, because the individual gets their identity from the models of their family members around them. And at the same time, you can't have a family if you don't have individuals voluntarily making the choice, making that risky jump into a commitment of lifelong commitment to another, of self-sacrificial devotion. And it's that self-sacrificial skin in the game that is the model for every type of relationship in our economy. And it can only be done in the context of a free will society, not a coercive, top-down managed society. So keep that in mind as we unpack the news cycles of today, people wanting us to lock up Roger Stone for victimless process crimes. It's all political stuff. And people get pleasure out of seeing their enemies scapegoated and sent off into prison, even when they're elderly men who've done nothing violent as far as we've seen. And it's that kind of callousness to the human dignity of even our enemies that we're losing, and we have to recover it. And we can speak boldly about the wrong ideas. You don't have to be sugarcoating. You can tell it like it is, and that's what we do too. And you can make coalitions and be patient. But we cannot disregard the ultimate respect for the individual person. That's the cornerstone, and that protection extends to the family, and it extends to the neighborhood, and it then extends to the broader society at large. A Neighbor's Choice is always going to pursue this end. aneighborschoice.com is our website. When we continue, we'll hear from Curt Ellis, who's going to talk about our relationship to China and its impact on everyday families.
You know what time of year it is.
Hurricane conditions in the next 36 hours.
You know what hurricanes can do.
Devastating damage expected.
Well, we want you to know, no matter how bad things get,
Power outages.
This is life-threatening.
you can stay up to date with the latest information here. Your home for news, talk, and information. And remember, we'll keep an eye on the tropics. You keep an ear on us.
Got batteries in the flashlight.
The all-new News Talk 1040 WHBO.
Yeah, we got our radio.
Despite an infection rate of over 14%, Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis today saying they can handle the cases.
We're not going back, closing things. I don't think that really is what's driving it. I mean, people going to business is not what's driving it. I think when you see the younger folks, I think a lot of it is more just social interactions.
But Florida is also among the 15 states seeing a rise in hospitalizations and deaths. Miami with the highest surge. The mayor now mandating masks be worn in public, and beaches in South Florida will be closed for the 4th of July. The white Atlanta police officer charged in the shooting death of Rayshard Brooks granted bond today at a hearing. Garrett Rolfe appearing via video. He has to wear an ankle monitor. Rolfe is accused of shooting Brooks in the back as he ran from police in a fast food parking lot. Stocks closing up today. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell testifying on Capitol Hill, saying jobs are starting to return, states opening up, but long-term recovery depends on containing the coronavirus outbreak. Michelle Franzen, ABC.
Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gornoski, and we're live across Central Florida, coming to you, having a great discussion about what the first principles are that we're going to find a common story together that can draw us out of endless conflict and blame games. At the same time, we want to be able to deal with the international scene and how that relates to folks here at home and everyday America. And so joining me now to discuss the relationship that we have with China today and how it developed and how it affects everyday folks and families is Curtis Ellis of America First Policies. How you doing?
Just great. Wonderful to be here.
Yeah, and it's great to talk to you on the program, Curtis. I think, first of all, I want to kind of start off. What's your thoughts on? It seems like the narrative has now shifted away from the discourse about the justice issue and policing issue, and it's now shifted back to a sequel for the Corona story. You know, every media, every news break, it's all about talking about increased death, increased infections, and a call for, another shutdown schools, shut down businesses, force masks. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't understand how the vast majority of America, according to the polls, can go along with this, because this is a recipe for the destruction of everything we built in this country that will have catastrophic consequences for human life if we keep going down this fear cycle every week.
And you have to ask if it will be every week into infinity. We've got ourselves in this echo chamber with social media, where it's not even a 24-hour news cycle, it's a nanosecond news cycle, and you're constantly amplifying whatever fear and message constantly. It's like an online mob that just bullies people and stampedes people in one direction or another, and the mob shifts direction. It's like being stampeded and everybody's heading for the exit in a stadium and trying to get through three doors, 10,000 people. We've seen that type of stampede and what impact it has. It kills people. So 1 week it's pandemic, the next week it's systemic racism, and the next week it's back to pandemic. Now, in the future, if we start detecting or imagining or computer modeling another outbreak, what's going to be the call to shut down the economy then? We got a preview of this in New York City a couple of years ago when a snowstorm, a blizzard, was predicted. Now, plenty of blizzards have come through New York City when it was populated by 8 million people or more and had subways and everything else. The city was never shut down. It was never preemptively shut down. But 2 years ago, on the prediction of some massive blizzard, Comrade de Blasio, the mayor of New York, decided he would shut everything down. And he called the subway to be shut down and everything else. And the blizzard never came, and everybody said, what did we just do to ourselves here? Well, now we're seeing the same thing done with this pandemic. But to answer your question, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And when people are panicked and driven into hysteria by our mass media has become mass hysteria, a generator of mass hysteria. You're paralyzed. People are paralyzed by fear. And that makes them susceptible to be led around. They're not thinking clearly. And so they can be told, well, we have to shut everything down and we can't let your kids go to school. I was talking to a mother the other day, and look, she wants, and if we did a poll at America First Policies, 80% of the people said they want schools to open in in September, because they fear their children will be left behind in education if the schools don't reopen. Yet you go onto these mommy blogs online and you have mothers shaming the other mothers. How dare you would send your kid back to school in September? There's absolutely zero scientific evidence, zero data that shows children are at risk of being infected or getting sick from this coronavirus any worse than the common cold. Absolutely zero evidence of that. Yet people are so whipped into a frenzy and hysteria that the online mobs are shaming mothers who would send their kids to school. This is an example of the type of, you ask the question, how could American people be for something that would destroy our way of life, shutting down our economy, shutting down our schools, and crippling the next generation? I should note that if you don't get a good job when you graduate high school or let's put it another way, the job you get and your earning power when you graduate high school, when you graduate college, is a very strong determinant of what you're going to make for the rest of your life. I'm not saying you will make the same amount of money the rest of your life that you do on your first job out of college, but it's like an escalator. Mm-hmm. And when you get on that escalator, that's when you start riding up. You start getting the raises, or you move up, or you gain the experience to trade up in jobs. So by shutting this economy down, we have crippled an entire generation. And I can only imagine what we're doing to the kids in school, because they are slipping behind. This online learning is not learning at all. And we're doing deep damage to our society that we won't know the full effects of it for decades. That is what I fear. And that's even before we get into how China they understand this, and they plan to take advantage of the chaos that has been created by this pandemic and the pandemic-induced shutdown. But just on the psychological impact, the economic impact, and the educational impact on this society is beyond comprehension. It's almost beyond comprehension. We can only speculate about it now, but speculate on rather solid premises, not something like the University of Washington computer models or the Imperial College models that speculated about how we all were going to die from the coronavirus. Right. No, this is based on really, really quite solid, observable, well-proven premises that when kids do not go to school, they do not learn. When people do not earn money, they will not earn money and get a promotion in 2 years. And if you don't acquire the skills you need today, you won't have them tomorrow. And that's basically the future that we are condemning an entire generation or 2 generations to right now. So it's very disturbing. And I think the pandemic and the protests play off each other. The shutdown of the economy basically shut down the normal rhythm of everyday life in America. Mm-hmm. And into that void swept the mobs and the protests. And people were eager to get out after being locked down at home for so long that when somebody came along and said, hey, come on down and let's protest George Floyd. And they didn't know who George Floyd was. And they'd never had a run-in with police themselves. But hey, it's a good excuse to go out and, meet some girls and, see human beings again.
Mm-hmm. And I think the thing that's bizarre to me is that they still want to it's this creepy, weird media narrative there. They want to shame people for running their little small business with maybe 10 customers a day coming in and out. But they want to celebrate like some kind of religious festival all of the approved social justice rallies with hundreds of thousands of people packed in together. And then they try to come up with some fake veneer of an excuse to justify, well, they all wear masks. No, they're not all wearing masks, first of all. And second of all, when you're out in the hot summer heat, packed together, moving around and marching, you're going to sweat, you're going to scratch your eyes, you're going to move your mask, you're going to breathe heavier. It's going to go around the particles around the crowd that are all packed in together, whether it's for the pride rallies I saw or whatever. There's this there's this new hierarchy that the media is trying to push in, where if you are a part of the groupthink cool crowd, you can break all the rules and have mass meetings, but you can't have more than 10 people at church or even have church at all in some cases. And it's just disturbing to me, this that we're putting up with this kind of otherization of whole swaths of innocent human beings who are just trying to survive, of all backgrounds. And I am just shocked at the thought that, to me, it seems like it should be 60 to 70% of Americans should be completely opposed to this media collusion with this radical ideology that's trying to destroy our entire country. Because what's happening is, you were talking about education. And I think we can see clearly that there's a lack of economic education by the folks who are buying into the fear-mongering of this virus. They keep hearing all these attacks on our local governor here in Florida, Ron DeSantis. I don't know too much about the particular policies that they're debating, but just generally speaking, I'm thinking to myself, they're trying to do trends saying DeSantis kills Florida, and it's the creepy, disturbing language. And you're like, okay, what do you want him to do? You want him to lock everything down, just shut everything down like a fascist state? Is that love, not hate, enough for you? Is that love trumps hate? Is that what you want? You want the total shutdown of the economy and just print money out of thin air for what? 5 years? 2 years? What is this infantilized, angry, vicious, snarling insanity? What do they want?
Yeah, that's a very good question. They're very good at criticizing, but they leave open their solution, as if it's feasible to continue the shutdown of our entire way of life for an indefinite period of time. There's a remarkable lack of analysis, intelligent analysis, objective analysis, and then problem solving or positing a solution after analyzing the problem. It's clear that the virus is not as deadly and lethal as initially feared. And I say feared because nobody knew. It's a novel virus. We don't have years of experience with this. We have no experience with it at all. And so you can excuse and understand why we might take some very drastic measures against the unknown. That's a whole nother question as to whether we should have or not in previous, but I'll leave that aside. Now we do know that particularly among people that are under the age of 70, 65 years old, it is not very lethal. It is not very deadly. It's not very, even beyond deadly. The rate of complications is very low. So that does not justify some of the drastic measures that were taken. And now that we have a better understanding of treatment and a better understanding of its lethality, you can't justify, we've got to shut everything down again. And how dare the president say we're not going to shut everything down if there's a second wave? And look, let's be clear. There's actually an NPR reporter, Greg Allen, NPR, not your, this is not your pro-Trump outfit, right? This is not to be mistaken for Breitbart News or something. He's reporting in Florida that he's hearing from hospitals that a lot of these infections, this increase in infection rate is by people who are going to the hospital for other reasons. And they're being tested because now they're just testing everybody that walks into the hospital to have a knee replacement or, they got their face gashed in a car accident. And they're finding these people are positive for the virus with absolutely no COVID symptoms, absolutely no problem from the virus, but they've been exposed, they're testing positive, and they're hospitalized to fix their broken bones, and now they're being counted as hospitalized as COVID hospitalizations. And this is what an NPR report is reporting. So we hear these reports, all these new infections, and oh my God, the sky is falling, we're all going to die. Well, no, not really. It's not as cut and dry. It's always a little more complicated than it might first appear. And if you had a clear, objective, calm media out there, they would honestly report this, that This is what we're seeing. Let's dig below the surface and see what we're finding. And they would call the hospitals and find out from the hospitals that they're not being overwhelmed. Their ICU units are not being overwhelmed the way it was when Governor Andrew Cuomo was saying, I need 40,000 ventilators or else you're going to have to tell me who do you choose to die, and nonsense like that. It's not the situation today at all. Not here, not in Texas, not anywhere.
Right.
So you do have to then question, why is the media doing this? And I have absolutely, I can be persuaded otherwise, but we know that there's an anti-Trump bias to the corporate media. Mm-hmm. And that whether it's consciously or unconsciously, they're calling for the shutdown of the economy because they know it'll hurt President Trump's reelection. They're willing to burn down this country in order to save this country from Donald J. Trump. That's their attitude.
We're speaking with Curtis Ellis, Senior Policy Advisor for America First Policies PAC. We'll continue in just a moment, live on A Neighbor's Choice, about China. What to do.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It can be devastating. There is a law firm in Tampa Bay that will keep you informed throughout the entire process. That law firm is Catania & Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania & Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims do not even realize that they can claim compensation for their loss until they talk to Catania & Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to CataniaCatania.com, award-winning over 28 years and family first. Catania & Catania, personal injury, auto accident, and motorcycle accident attorneys.
Monitoring spokeswoman. And now, Easy Lift Movers is on the air, reminding all Americans to show support to the brave men and women of our U.S. military. Their bravery and tireless efforts should never go unnoticed. This salute is brought to you by Easy Lift Movers, serving the community with quality and pride. Call the pros today, 813-505-8474. That's 813-505-8474. Also, all troops and veterans will receive a 10% discount. That's Easy Lift Movers, proudly saluting our troops and veterans. They are professionals who care.
How would you like to be a part of the Guinness Book of World Records? Here's a unique opportunity for you if you own a boat. Conservative Grounds Coffee Shop in Largo will be hosting the world record for the largest boat parade on August 15th. This record-breaking event will be coming to the Pinellas Intercoastal Waterways in beautiful Clearwater. This parade will be held in honor of the 45th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, and all the accomplishments from his administration. More than 1,200 supporters are expected, and that's a number to exceed the current Guinness World Record. If you support the Trump administration, bring your vessel and come out and join in for this once-in-a-lifetime event and be a part of a world record. All profits go to charity or conservative political campaigns in the area.
To register for this once-in-a-lifetime event and be a part of the Guinness Book of World Records, visit HugeBoatParade.com. That's HugeBoatParade.com.
Homeowners, do you have trees that are dangerously close to your home that can do a lot of damage?
Oops.
Well, ABC 123 offers experienced, fully insured professionals at honest, affordable prices. Their equipment is state-of-the-art. They use the safest practices in the industry. They have 5-star Google reviews. ABC 123 only employs certified arborists. Call them at 727-522-8733. That's 727-522-8733. Or go to abc123.com.
Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gornoski. We're live across Florida and online worldwide with Curtis Ellis, who's the Senior Policy Advisor for America First Policies, Super PAC. And we're talking about how do we get our jobs going again? How do we start making stuff? How do we start getting back to that growth, that real deep growth, instead of being focused on consumerism? How do we make things again? How do we create the environment where Nikola Tesla and Edison and the Wright brothers and everybody was able to create so much leapfrog technology and be the envy of the world? And so, Curtis Ellis, I want to know how do we begin this process of creating that, unleashing that American invention and that American entrepreneurial growth again?
Well, I think that the first thing we have to do is take these tariffs that are in place against China, that President Trump put in place against China, and make them permanent. We have to send a clear signal to the giant corporations that you're not going to go back to business as usual, the way it was before President Donald J. Trump. That you cannot be empowering this dictatorial, expansionist regime in Beijing, the Communist Party of China, and you can't be. We have to defund China. You can't be funding them. You can't be sending them our jobs, sending them giving them the technology, the jobs, the capital, while starving our country of the same. There is a zero-sum game. It's either here or there. Every job that you create in China is a job that you're not creating in the United States. Every job you create in Mexico is a job you are not creating in the United States. So you could make a case that creating jobs in Mexico could have some impact on jobs in America with that, but we can get into that later. So we start by making these tariffs permanent, so that nobody thinks that, well, I won't build that plant in the United States because when Joe Biden gets elected, the tariffs will go away and we can go back to accommodating our dictatorial communist friends in Beijing. So that's number one. There has to be a clear message sent to Apple, to General Motors, to all of the industries that are using manufacturing and labor in China to sell goods in America, that you can't do that anymore. If you can make it here, you should make it here. And in addition to the tariffs, making those tariffs that are in place permanent, I think there should be further tariffs. There need to be equalizing tariffs. This is how we did it. This is how we built America in the 19th century, how we built our industrial machine. It was behind a wall of protective tariffs. And Teddy Roosevelt, everybody on Mount Rushmore, they all believed and they all used tariffs to equalize the cost of cheap labor overseas with the rather well-paid labor in America. American labor was better paid than European labor at the time. Asia, forget about it. That didn't even exist. There was no industry there. So the big competitor was Europe. And the architects of the American system, as it was known, understood that to have well-paid labor in the United States, you couldn't have cheap labor from overseas selling into this market. You couldn't have goods made with cheap labor being sold in the United States. You had to protect the home market, and that way the people who earned more were able to buy more, and they were buying basically from their neighbors, right? The farmer was selling, didn't have to ship his goods halfway around the world to find a market. He could ship them to his well-paid neighbor who was making the plows that were being used on the farm, rather than buying plows made in Britain and then trying to sell your corn to the British.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to, tariffs, using federal procurement, buy American, hire American, should be the ground rule for every time the federal government goes shopping. Mm-hmm. It spends more money than most nations. It buys more in goods and services than the gross national product of most countries on earth. Every time the federal government buys something, American producers should be first in line. Mm-hmm. And part of that is closing a loophole in some of these trade deals we have. Every time we sign a trade agreement with another country, there's a clause in there that we afford that other country what's called national treatment. We pretend as if a company in Japan, though we don't have a free trade agreement with Japan, but just for an example, if we did, a company in Japan would be treated as if it is an American company. So that when we do have Buy American provisions for parts of our government, the Pentagon in particular. It's required to buy American. But under national treatment loophole clauses in our trade agreements, these other countries, their companies are treated as if they were American. Mm-hmm. And this is grossly unequal because our government spends far more money than any other government. So we have a free trade agreement, let's say, with Belgium. Belgium doesn't buy, the Belgian government doesn't buy as much as the American government, not by a factor of 1,000. So we're getting the bad end of that deal. So the Belgians are allowed to bid on U.S. government purchases, but we in turn get to bid on Belgian government purchases, but they don't buy nearly as much as we do. So we're at the losing end of that deal. So we have to leverage federal procurement dollars for American industries. That way, I set up a company in America to make LED lighting. I know I have a customer, the federal government. It'll buy everything I make. Mm-hmm. If I start making penicillin in my penicillin factory that I just opened in America, the federal government will buy the penicillin because it can't go buying it from China, which is where they currently buy stuff. So those are two immediate steps we could take that would really, really boost our domestic industry and bring back those jobs.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see. I like the idea of creating an environment with radical economic liberty here at home, getting rid of income tax, getting rid of regulations, getting rid of a lot of the spending and distortions in our domestic market, and then creating tariffs to replace the internal taxation and subsidies and so forth that we've been so kind of hampered by. Let's continue this discussion.
Amen. I agree with you 100%.
Very good. Curtis Ellis, let's continue this discussion soon. We'll try to do something together again and learn more about ways to build up the family, to build up the small towns, to build up American workers and jobs. And I think it'll be a great discussion. Thanks for your time, Curtis.
Thank you. Take care.
I'm David Gornoski. You've been listening to A Neighbor's Choice. Up next, we'll hear from Scott Horton about what's going on with Afghanistan and Russia. Tune in just a moment.